I thought I was alone. The curtains were drawn, the house was silent, and I let myself drift into a moment I believed no one would ever witness. But then, the door opened. And my stepson walked in. From that second, nothing in our house, in my marriage, in my carefully guarded life, would ever be the same again. My name is Claire. I am 35 years old, and this is a story I never thought I would tell. Not to anyone, not even to myself out loud. It has lived inside me like a shadow, heavy and restless, pressing against my chest every time I try to forget. But some secrets are not meant to be buried. Some secrets demand to be spoken, even if only whispered in the dark. That day had started so ordinary, so painfully ordinary, that I should have known something would break. I was home from work, not because I was sick, though I had told my boss I needed a sick day. The truth was, I just couldn't face the office anymore. The endless emails, the meetings where no one listened, the fake smiles. I needed air. I needed to be somewhere quiet, where the weight of pretending wasn't crushing me. So I stayed home. Richard, my husband, was already at work before I even opened my eyes. He's a good man, stable, reliable, the kind of man my mother had always told me to marry. He'll take care of you, Claire, she used to say. And he does, in his way. But what no one ever told me was how lonely stability can be. How silence can creep into a marriage and fill every corner until you don't even notice it anymore. Daniel, my stepson, was supposed to be out too. At 20, he had classes most of the day and a part-time job at night. I had grown used to the rhythm of our lives, the way we moved around each other like planets in the same orbit, close enough to see, never close enough to touch. That morning, the house felt empty. Too empty. I wandered from room to room, trying to read, trying to distract myself, but the quiet pressed in tighter. It was then, almost without thinking, that I opened the drawer of my bedside table and pulled out the toy I had hidden there for months. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd need. When I first bought it, I laughed at myself, embarrassed even in the store. But over time, it became a strange comfort, a way to feel alive again in a house that so often felt like stone. I don't know what made me do it that morning. Maybe it was the silence, maybe it was the loneliness, maybe it was just the need to feel something, anything. I closed the guest room door, thinking I was safe, thinking no one would come home. I let myself go in a way I never could with Richard, not anymore. And then the door creaked. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, the sound of my own heartbeat pounding too loud. But when I turned, there he was. Daniel. My stepson. Standing in the doorway, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly open, frozen in place as though he had stepped into a nightmare. Or maybe I was the nightmare. My heart stopped. My breath caught in my throat. Shame, cold and sharp, sliced through me. I scrambled to cover myself, to hide the toy, to erase what he had seen. But it was too late. Daniel, I started, my voice breaking, but I couldn't even find the words. He should have run. He should have slammed the door and pretended it never happened. But he didn't. He stepped inside, slow, hesitant, as though he was afraid I would shatter if he moved too quickly. Claire, he whispered, and I hated the way my name sounded on his lips in that moment. Too soft. Too knowing. Tears burned my eyes, hot and humiliating. Please, Daniel, don't tell your father. This isn't, my words crumbled into sobs. And then, something I never expected. He came closer. Not with judgment, not with anger, but with something else. Something I couldn't name. You don't have to explain, he said quietly, almost tenderly. You don't have to be ashamed. His words pierced me deeper than any accusation could have. I wanted to scream at him, to push him away, to lock the door and never see him again. But instead, I sat frozen, my body trembling, my shame raw and open like a wound. And then, in the strangest, most dangerous twist of fate, Daniel did something that would change everything. He reached for the toy in my hand. Slowly. Carefully. as if asking permission without words. I should have stopped him. I should have screamed. But I didn't. Instead, I let the silence answer for me. The silence between us thickened, every second stretching longer than the last. My breath shook, my body trembling with the weight of what had just happened. I was 35 years old, his stepmother, the woman who was supposed to hold everything together, and yet here I was, unraveling in front of him. Daniel's eyes didn't leave mine. Not once. They were steady, too steady for someone his age. In them, I saw no judgment, no disgust, just an unspoken understanding that terrified me even more than anger would have. "Claire," he said again, softer this time, like he was afraid the air itself might shatter me if he spoke too loud. His voice was deep, steady, carrying a gentleness that I had never noticed before. "You don't have to cry." But I was already crying. Hot tears streaked down my face, unstoppable, spilling all the shame I had held inside for years. "You don't understand," I whispered, choking on the words. "I shouldn't, you weren't supposed to see me like this." "I do understand," he replied quickly, almost cutting me off, and his voice trembled just slightly. "I know what it's like, to feel alone. To feel like no one sees you." Those words, they sliced right through me. Because he was right. Richard hadn't seen me in years. He looked at me, yes, but never into me. And here was Daniel, my stepson, saying the very thing I had buried deep in my chest, the thing I was too afraid to admit even to myself. I tried to wipe my tears with the back of my hand, but Daniel moved before I could. He reached out, hesitating for just a fraction of a second, and then gently brushed the tears from my cheek with his thumb. The tenderness of it made my breath catch. "Daniel," my voice shook. I wanted to stop him, to tell him to leave, to pretend this never happened. But my body betrayed me, leaning ever so slightly into his touch, craving the comfort I hadn't felt in years. He picked up the toy I had dropped, holding it awkwardly in his hand. His cheeks flushed red, but his eyes didn't falter. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly, almost a whisper. The words hung in the air, heavy, dangerous, impossible. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might tear itself free from my chest. Every part of me screamed that this was wrong, that I had to end it before it went any further. And yet, some quiet, desperate part of me clung to his words like they were air. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I lowered my eyes, trembling, and in that silence, I gave him permission. Daniel moved closer, slowly, cautiously, as though every step might scare me away. His hand brushed against mine as he held the toy out, waiting, watching my face for any sign of resistance. But there was none. When he helped me, it wasn't clumsy or careless. It was deliberate, gentle, as if he understood that this wasn't about the toy at all. It was about being seen. It was about someone noticing my loneliness, my need, my aching emptiness that Richard never cared to fill. I gasped, not from the act itself, but from the intimacy of it, from the fact that Daniel, of all people, was the one who stepped into the space where my husband should have been. His other hand steadied mine, his touch warm, grounding me in a moment that should have been unbearable but instead felt like drowning and breathing all at once. Tears blurred my vision again, but this time they weren't only from shame. They were from release. From years of silence breaking in a single moment of forbidden comfort. When it was over, I collapsed against him, my body shaking, my face buried in his shoulder. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me tightly, firmly, as though he could protect me from everything, even from myself. "It's okay," he whispered into my hair. "I've got you. You don't have to carry this alone anymore." I sobbed harder, clutching his shirt, the weight of my secret pressing into him like a confession. "I'm so sorry, Daniel," I choked out. "You should never have seen me like that." But he only shook his head. "Don't be sorry," he murmured. "I'd rather know your truth than see you hide in pain." We sat there for what felt like forever, just holding on to each other, the toy long forgotten on the floor, the world outside that guest room door fading into nothing. It was just him and me, bound together by something neither of us could have imagined, something that would change everything. When I finally pulled back, wiping my swollen eyes, Daniel looked at me with a mixture of fear and determination. "No one ever has to know," he said firmly. "This stays between us." And I believed him. But deep down, I also knew something else. This wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning. When we finally left that room, the air of the house felt different, heavier, charged, almost alive with the weight of what had just happened. I straightened my clothes, my hands trembling, trying to erase any trace of what had taken place. Daniel didn't say a word, and I couldn't look him in the eyes. We walked down the stairs together, slowly, as if afraid the walls themselves might whisper our secret. My legs felt weak, my heart still pounding in my chest. I had no idea what to do, no idea how to carry on like nothing had happened. But Daniel, he stayed close, just a step behind me, almost like a silent protector. In the kitchen, I busied myself with small things, wiping the counter that didn't need wiping, filling a glass of water just to have something in my hands. Anything to distract myself from the storm raging inside me. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Claire," he said softly, standing in the doorway, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He looked so much younger in that moment, so unsure of what to do. "Are you okay?" The question hit me harder than it should have. No one had asked me that in years. Not Richard, not friends, not even family. "Are you okay?" It was such a simple question, but it cracked me wide open. I turned to him, tears filling my eyes again. "No," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I don't think I've been okay for a very long time." Daniel stepped closer, hesitant but determined. "You don't have to go through this alone anymore," he said. "You've been carrying too much. I can see it." His words made me crumble. I sank into one of the kitchen chairs, covering my face with my hands. "Daniel, I don't know what's happening to me," I admitted. "I feel invisible. Like I'm just existing. Going through the motions. And today, my voice broke. Today you saw just how broken I am." He pulled out the chair beside me and sat down. "You're not broken," he said firmly. "You're human. You needed comfort, and no one gave it to you. That's not your fault." I looked at him then, really looked at him. His eyes were so steady, so full of something I hadn't seen in years, care. Genuine, unfiltered care. I don't know what possessed me, but I reached out, my fingers brushing against his hand on the table. "You shouldn't have had to see me like that," I whispered again. He shook his head. "Maybe I was meant to," he replied softly. "Maybe you needed someone to see you." The words sat between us, heavy and dangerous, yet strangely comforting. My heart ached with the weight of them. For the rest of the afternoon, we stayed in the kitchen, talking in fragments, slipping into silences that said more than words ever could. Daniel stayed near, always watching me, as if making sure I wouldn't collapse under the weight of my own guilt. When evening came and Richard's car pulled into the driveway, panic rushed through me like ice water. I glanced at Daniel, fear written all over my face. "Remember," he said quietly, "no one ever has to know. This is ours." I nodded, forcing myself to breathe. I smoothed my hair, wiped my eyes, and plastered on the practiced smile I'd worn for years. Richard walked in, briefcase in hand, tie loosened, tired but composed. He kissed my cheek out of habit, asked about dinner, and moved on. He didn't notice my trembling hands. He didn't notice the way Daniel's gaze lingered protectively on me. He didn't notice anything at all. And in that moment, I realized the truth that broke me more than anything else: my husband would never see me the way Daniel had in that single afternoon. That night, after Richard had gone to bed, Daniel found me again. I was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the television without even realizing it wasn't turned on. He sat beside me quietly, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. "You don't have to be alone in this house," he said gently. "Not anymore." I closed my eyes, swallowing back tears. Daniel, this can't happen again. It was a mistake. It has to end here. He was silent for a long moment before he answered. If that's what you want, I'll respect it. But Claire, his voice lowered, almost breaking, don't call it a mistake. Not when it was the first time I've ever seen you truly breathe. Those words stayed with me long after he left the room. They haunted me, wrapped around me like a second skin. And deep down, I knew this was far from over. The days that followed were a blur. I went about my routines, cooking, cleaning, working, but everything felt different, heavier. The guest room became a shadow in my mind, a place I couldn't walk past without feeling my chest tighten. Richard noticed nothing. He moved through the house like a ghost, present in body but absent in every other way. I envied how easily he could disappear into his work, his numbers, his carefully built walls. I envied how he never seemed to feel the silence that was choking me. But Daniel noticed. He saw the way I lingered at the sink, staring out the window too long. He saw the way my hands trembled when I poured my coffee. He saw the tears I tried to hide late at night when I thought the house was asleep. And each time, he was there. Quietly. Steadily. Like an anchor I hadn't asked for but desperately needed. One night, when the weight became too much, I found myself sitting on the floor of the laundry room, knees pulled to my chest, sobbing into the fabric of a towel just to muffle the sound. I thought I was alone. But Daniel found me. The door creaked open, and I looked up, my face streaked with tears, my breath ragged. His eyes widened, pain flashing across his face at the sight of me. Claire, he whispered, stepping inside. He knelt down in front of me, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for mine. Why are you doing this to yourself? I can't carry it, I choked out. I can't carry this secret, Daniel. I feel like I'm drowning. And every time I look at your father, my words broke, dissolving into sobs. Daniel squeezed my hands tightly. You don't have to carry it alone. I told you, I'm here. I shook my head, my voice breaking. You shouldn't be. You deserve better than being dragged into my mess. But his voice was firm, unwavering. Claire, I chose this. I chose to be here for you. And I'd choose it again. His words sank into me, heavy and terrifying and beautiful all at once. I leaned into him then, unable to fight the pull any longer. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me close, letting me cry against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear, grounding me in a way I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. We stayed like that for a long time, the laundry room quiet except for my ragged breath slowly evening out. When I finally pulled back, his hands were still on mine, his eyes searching my face. You're stronger than you think, he said softly. But even strong people need someone to lean on. And in that moment, I realized something I had been too afraid to admit, I needed him. Not as a stepson, not as someone forbidden, but as the only person who truly saw me. From that night on, things changed. The distance between us was gone, replaced by a quiet understanding that lived in every glance, every accidental touch, every moment we shared in silence. It wasn't about the toy anymore. It wasn't even about that one afternoon in the guest room. It was about being seen. Being held. Being reminded that I was still alive. But with that comfort came fear. Fear of being discovered. Fear of what would happen if Richard ever saw what had grown between us. Fear of the future I could no longer imagine without Daniel in it. One evening, as we sat together in the living room while Richard worked late again, Daniel turned to me. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with something unspoken. We can't go back, can we? He asked quietly. I looked at him, my heart aching. No, I whispered. We can't. Silence stretched between us, thick with everything we couldn't say. But we can move forward, he added, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer, but my silence spoke louder than words. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. Whatever happened next, whatever risks came our way, We were bound together now by something that could never be undone. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the silence. Because I wasn't facing it alone anymore. I don't know how this story ends. Maybe it ends in fire, in ruin, in secrets spilling where they were never meant to. Or maybe, just maybe, it ends in something softer, something real. What I do know is this: sometimes, the most forbidden truths are the ones that save us. And that afternoon, the day my stepson walked in and saw me in my most vulnerable moment, was the day I learned what it meant to be seen again. This is the secret I can never tell my husband. But now you know. If you were in my shoes, would you carry this to your grave, or would you confess? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm reading every single one. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next story.